In this movie, I briefly want to touch on the integration between Final Cut and its sister motion graphics and titling program, Motion. So Motion is really deep. There's an entire essential training course on how to use it, and it's actually even longer than this one. So in this one movie, we really can't go into how to create all sorts of neat motion graphic designs and 2D and 3D title sequences, but I do want to touch on one thing, and that's how to use Motion to create a Final Cut template, specifically an adjustment layer, which is something you may have used in programs like Photoshop or Premiere or After Effects. An adjustment layer is going to allow you to make a change to one effect layer, like applying a color correction effect, for example, and then the change is applied to all the clips below. So here we have our sequence, and what I want to do is put an adjustment layer above this sequence, make adjustments, and then those adjustments will be applied to all of these clips. All right, so I'm going to go over to Motion. And for this, I'm going to choose Final Cut Title. Okay, and by default, a Final Cut title just has two elements, a text layer and a title background. And this would be your starting place to design all sorts of amazing titles, which we're not going to go into here. I'm actually going to delete my text layer by just selecting it here and delete, and we're actually done. That's all we have to do. So instead of typing our text and applying all sorts of beautiful 3D magic, I'm just going to press Command-S to save. Here under Category, you can choose a new category, and for this I'm going to type in Motion Effects, and I'm just going to call this Adjustment Layer. All right, and I'll publish, and publish means that it's going to send it back over to Final Cut, which I'll go to now. And if I go to the title browser, under Motion Effects, you'll see that I have my adjustment layer. So let's add it to our sequence. I'll go ahead and mark this with my in and my out, and then I'll press Q to connect this to my sequence. And so we've perfectly timed our adjustment layer over the entire sequence, and right now it's doing nothing. Right now it's just my title background, and I'm able to add effects to this. And by the way, this isn't really the official workflow, but it is a really cool workaround to do what we need to do. So let's go ahead and make some changes. I think the first thing I want to do is just do a color correction grade. So I'll press Command-6 to open up my color board. And something we're pretty familiar with is our bleach bypass. So let's do that again. I'll go to exposure and crunch my blacks and raise my highlights, and then bring down my saturation. And then I can cool it off or warm it up. I'll go ahead and just warm it up a bit. All right, so here's my bleach bypass. And as I go over this, you can see that absolutely every clip underneath the adjustment layer has been affected. So this is really similar to adding a color correction effect to a compound clip, but we didn't have to turn this into a compound clip. Everything is still separate. All right, so this is really great. This is actually pretty huge. But you don't just have to add color correction effects. You can add regular effects too. So if I come into my effect browser, I can do any of the looks. I can add those. One thing is that if you preview, so I'm hovering here and usually you can preview to see what it looks like. If you do that for an adjustment layer, you don't get a preview. It's just black. You would have to actually go down to the clips themselves and select those and get the preview like so. All right, so that's the one caveat, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and just select my adjustment layer, and I don't think I'm going to apply a look. I'm going to apply a vignette. So I'm just going to type it down here, vignette. All right, and we'll add it to the adjustment layer and maybe make just a little change on that. So now we have our bleach bypass and our vignette, and I'm going to do one more thing just because layering lots of effects is fun. I'm going to do some motion effects. So let's bring it down, and this is really cool because it's doing it to everything. All right, so everything is brought down. Let's say that we want this for a title sequence. You can go ahead and maybe come down to distort, and actually let's just enable the parameters on screen, and we'll bring it in like so, and then we can reposition it by going back to the transform and over. And so now we can have the video over here on the left and our titles over here on the right, for example.
My recipe are all my own creations, so
All right, so a really nice way to use adjustment layers to make many changes all at once, and we didn't even have to turn it into a compound clip. So that is the very, very tip of the iceberg on Motion. But I just basically wanted to show you this so that you can see how to do at least one very useful thing in Motion that you can use for very practical purposes, even if you don't need to create motion graphics or titles. And if you want to learn how to use the program in depth, then just check out the Motion Essential training on lynda.com.